Hello and welcome to my cake kitchen. My name is Gladys and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. I also create baking tutorials live, taking you through a whole baking process or identifying a particular question we want to answer. How to take a process, take you from start to finish, handing you useful, reliable information to help you navigate the processes of baking and buttercream making in your own home. And today we are simply making faux Swiss meringue buttercream. Now, this is a kind of buttercream I have made on this channel before. I'll link that in the description box. And Swiss meringue buttercream is not new to the channel. I have made several videos in long form and live videos explaining Swiss meringue buttercream, which is a great buttercream to make with smooth mouth feel. However, there are beginner friendly issues with that kind of buttercream where beginners don't find it particularly an attractive type of buttercream because of the techniques and processes involved to yield great results. The good news is that there are alternatives to easing that process, and that is what has led to the making of faux Swiss meringue buttercream. Now, just a little bit of information or some synopsis of Swiss meringue buttercream. It is derived generally from raw egg whites that is cooked over a double boiler, and then it's brought to a temperature essentially by pasteurizing it to a safe temperature where the bacteria is dormant or safe for the egg whites to then be whipped before it's cooled, and then butter is dumped into it to derive the buttercream. That is the gist or the general summary of how to make Swiss meringue buttercream. But I'll link videos in the description box for you to check for yourself. And yes, that process is really long, tedious, and not particularly beginner friendly because you have to consider the processes to derive the best form of meringue, consider the safety of the eggs as well as the technique itself. So the alternative is to derive it by using pasteurized eggs. Pasteurized eggs is just a process where the eggs are pre-cooked in gentle heat, eliminating the risk of foodborne bacteria, and makes the eggs safe for you to use in its apparently raw form. It's not raw because it's pasteurized. So it eliminates, when using that kind of pasteurized eggs for Swiss meringue buttercream, it completely eliminates the process of having to cook the eggs yourself over a double boiler. Personally, I have in the past spoken about my disinterest in using pasteurized eggs just based on preference. I should say that. The preference is because I find egg whites queasy. The idea of eggs makes me queasy, but cooking it myself over a double boiler reassures me that it is going to be safe to give to customers. However, when I made the first batch of faux Swiss buttercream, I was kind of really impressed. I'll link the video in the description for you to check. However, when I did it, I realized that my fear or my thoughts about what pasteurized eggs would be were completely set in my own bias, and that there was no really strong justification for what I thought the process was. So that was my very first time of trying the pasteurized egg white. I've made Swiss meringue buttercream for the best part of over 8 years and counting, and having had the same problems that most people would have with Swiss meringue buttercream, because as a beginner, the mouthfeel of buttercream was so important for me that I was able to almost like get down and nail down the process of deriving Swiss meringue buttercream without much issues. That recipe is out on the channel. You can check that for yourself and hopefully you find some value in it. So when I created the first Swiss faux buttercream, as in the faux Swiss meringue buttercream, I derived it using, instead of granulated sugar, I used icing sugar, right? My brain has gone blank a little bit. I am making faux Swiss meringue buttercream. So just to give you some context, when I first tried the faux Swiss meringue buttercream, I used icing sugar. So because it was a new thing I was learning, there are so many recipes I watch on the internet and during research. So I'm sure I'm not new to this and I'm not new to trying this. However, what is unique about this recipe and the testing process is that instead of using any other recipe, I just decided to use my own Swiss meringue buttercream recipe that I adapted to my own preferences, which solved some of the innate problems that come with Swiss meringue buttercream, the buttery nature, the mouthfeel, and all of that. I just thought I'll replicate that using pasteurized egg whites, and then we'll see. The results were amazing. I was actually very well impressed by the first outcome. So instead of the original recipes, all of which I'll link in the description box, I had the granulated sugar replaced with icing sugar, and I eliminated some other ingredients that I would normally use. And the results were great. It came out great with a good mouthfeel. The taste profile was great. And also, it actually forms. But the highlight of that buttercream was its stability. I was way impressed about the stability of that buttercream. So much so that you would see my first reactions of the buttercream when I made it. I'll link the video in the description box. But after the video, I put the buttercream at room temperature. It's been a slightly warm couple of days in England. And in that period, when I made the buttercream, I left it at room temperature for 48 hours. And I was very impressed by the outcomes. I have noted that, and I will be deriving some information for you in the community post. So you want to check that out. So with that in mind, I thought I would come back. In my research, I found that there are some recipes that use the pasteurized egg white and icing sugar, and then some use pasteurized egg white and castor or granulated sugar. The issue with the granulated sugar or castor sugar is that in original Swiss meringue buttercream, follow me on this one. It will be useful information for you later. And if you're in the chat trying to ask what I am doing, I'm trying to make faux Swiss meringue buttercream. Buttercream is just an addition to cake that enhances flavor and adds helps in the stacking process. It's used for filling cakes and all of that. So if you're a baker or if you're into cakes, I'm sure you would have heard about Swiss meringue buttercream at some point. So follow me on the information about Swiss meringue buttercream and what I'm trying to do today. The original Swiss meringue buttercream, which is the original way of doing it, which is using raw eggs that are cooked over a double boiler and deriving the buttercream by whisking the egg whites to a meringue phase. The key thing being the eggs are cooked. The raw eggs are then cooked to come to a certain temperature before it's made into a meringue. The thing about that kind of buttercream, that kind of process is that castor sugar or granulated sugar is used to mix into the egg whites. And so whilst cooking the egg whites over the double boiler is when steam is used to cook something slowly. So in this process, the egg whites is mixed with granulated or castor sugar. The key thing to note here is the granules that are contained in this castor or granulated sugar. Granulated sugar would have bigger sugar granules, whereas castor sugar are finer. That's just a slight difference. In this case, when the granulated sugar is introduced into the egg whites and it is cooking over the double boiler, the idea is to cook the eggs, but the other subsequent intention is also to allow heat to dissolve the sugar quickly in the egg whites, forming the syrup that will eventually transition to becoming the meringue, right? So in the faux Swiss meringue, you want to think, how can I dissolve the sugar quickly enough? Because if you don't dissolve the sugar, it is going to affect the process of your meringue making. So some recipes then have decided to solve that problem by introducing icing sugar, which is super fine sugar or confectioner's sugar that is introduced into the pasteurized egg white because the cooking is eliminated. So the heat source that will then help dissolve the sugar is completely gone. So you want to find a way where your meringue is still fine without the gritty texture in it. So as a result, the first Faux Swiss meringue buttercream I created had the icing sugar. However, I checked and there were other recipes that actually used castor sugar or granulated sugar, but then they were able to introduce a bit of warmth into the process without using the double boiler method that can be long and exhausting or tedious. I decided to come back and derive the same recipe, replacing what do you call it? Icing sugar, replacing icing sugar in the first recipe I made with caster sugar. So essentially I'm making Faux Swiss meringue buttercream, but I'm using caster sugar, and I'm going to be introducing some hot water to see if I can dissolve the sugar, and then we can undertake the entire process and see what results we find. By so doing, if you're new to baking and decorating and buttercream making, you find a resource material that answer a specific question as to why you should use either caster sugar, granulated sugar, or icing sugar when making Faux Swiss meringue buttercream. And that is what I am doing exactly today. But before we undertake that, I'm going to just boil the kettle, because even though we are not going to be cooking these egg whites because they are already pasteurized, we need some warm water to warm the bowl up and subsequently try and dissolve the sugar as quickly as we can. So if you're new in the chat, hello there. Thank you for being here. And if you're live in the chat, there is Nengi, there is Blaze, there is Roblox. Thank you all for being here. But if you're watching this on replay also, thanks for your time. I hope you find some value in this video today. So without having to waste your time, we're just going to jump right into it. I will leave ingredient quantities and all the details in the description box once the session is done. And if you have further questions, you can put them in the comments or in the chat. And perhaps join us here and also join us in our interactions on the live post, as in community posts, where there is updates on what we get up to about all things cake. I think something that will prove very critical to this process is the butter. I'll tell you all about it in a moment. In the meantime, as always, when you're making Swiss meringue buttercream, the formation of the meringue is so important that you want to make sure that all the utensils and tools you are using are rid of anything greasy or now the challenge is to make sure that I can do this without this hot water getting right into this pot, this bowl. So what I'm doing here is, what I'm simply doing here is that into this bowl, there's pasteurized eggs. And into the pasteurized eggs is a quantity of caster sugar. You can opt for caster sugar or granulated sugar. I opted for caster sugar simply because it's finely, the granules are finer compared to granulated sugar, and it will derive me some quicker results and better results, hopefully. So that is why I'm using that. But you can follow the same process by using granulated sugar if you don't have access to caster sugar. Now, in Swiss meringue buttercream, the original Swiss meringue buttercream, where I'm cooking this over the double boiler, I would be using a whisk. But over here, the key thing is to ensure that you are able to feel whether the sugar is fully dissolved in the egg whites without a gritty feel when you touch the egg white. So I'm going to wash my hands, and I'm going to probably dump my hand in so I can have a feel of the egg white syrup. With that done, okay. Wow. So with just the introduction of heat here, the sugar without the sugar, the sugar is melted. Wow. I'm quite surprised. There is no gritty feel to the syrup at all. And that's it. Essentially, that is the secret to... Okay, right. Let me not overstate this. Let's get through the process. But the goal to have the water help dissolve the sugar has completely done its job, and I'm not mad about it. Now, if you have questions about how hot you should have the water, this is hot boiling water from the kettle. hot boiling water. Normally, my hands are slightly desensitized because I am in the kitchen a lot and I use my hands a lot. But this is hot, like really hot boiling water. So just to give you some context, that is the kind of water you want. If you want to make it any less, well, I couldn't tell you how less you should, because what I used here is just hot boiling water. And as you can see, we're barely 2 minutes in, and our sugar has completely melted. So what I have done is I have gone ahead, as I was saying, you want to make sure that your tools and equipment are all rid of grease, because grease or any form of fat or oils will interfere with the meringue making process and not let your meringue whip up properly. So you want to make sure that your bowls or everything you're using are completely washed, and you can clean and degrease them. A good tip is to use vinegar or lemon to wipe the bowl. So for me, this is what I do, and that is simply because I aim to give you my process exactly as I know it and use it, so that you know you are getting first-hand information based on my own experience. So for instance, this bowl is a bowl I use for baking. I made a lot of butter in it. There is no doubt there is always going to be grease or oil residue in the bowl, especially after making a batch of cake or buttercream. So even though I've washed it and put it there, anytime I'm going to have to make Swiss meringue buttercream, it means I have to rewash the bowl over and over again. And a good tip is that my washing sponge, the general one that I use every time, is not the one I'll be using to wash this, especially for Swiss meringue buttercream. The reason is washed sponges and kitchen cloths will have oil and fat residue or grease residue in it. So it's just pointless reusing that to wash the entire bowl again. So for me, I'll have to introduce a new, brand new, unused sponge if I'm washing my bowl new. You can pick sponges at the shop for 37p for one, and I don't necessarily make Swiss meringue buttercream every day. And plus, after using that sponge, it just transitions to being the sponge that washes my glass bowls or glass drinking glasses for the house. So that's a 2-in-1 deal for me. So a clean sponge washes all of that, leaves them, turn them upside down to kind of dry, air dry, and then I come back with some kitchen towel into which I will sprinkle some like vinegar and then wipe everything. And this also includes the use of my whisk. And I think the only thing I'm a bit iffy about is this spatula, because spatula is plastic. You're like, how much grease can you get out of it? So by so doing, I try to also reduce the use of the spatula at the beginning phases of the buttercream making process. And then eventually it comes into use when the butter is introduced. So that is like a practical tip of what I do. But saying that, I've ended up touching this with my hands after picking up the butter. So I want to be very careful with that. Another thing you want to do when you're making this buttercream also is to ensure that pasteurized eggs are sort of changed in the proteins in pasteurized eggs are changed slightly in the pasteurization process. So you want to make sure that you add an acid that helps to unstick the egg white protein. It will give you a better outcome for whipping the meringue. So I am going to just do that. We have about, I think when I was looking at the research, you want to introduce that maybe 2 minutes in when you are whisking. So I am just going to do that. In the meantime, we want to plug the mixer in. I have a confession about this mixer. A couple of weeks ago, or a couple of videos ago, you will find that I was complaining about the mixer head being a little bit noisy and I had to check it out. Truth is, I haven't managed to check it out. So, and what I've done is I've gone for the shortcut. Oh, I'm having a whole fight with my mixer, people, right? God, I've had a whole fight with right, it's done now. Right, so instead of going to fix this up, guess what I did? I just decided to stop using it for high demanding task like whisking so much, and I've just reduced it to low quantity workload and all of that. So this is the first time I'm going to be using it, because when you're doing Swiss meringue buttercream, you want to make sure that your mixer is whisking at high speed, and it's going to be whisking for up to about 6 minutes ish, if you like. So if you hear my mixer going, I'm probably going to have to turn it off and transition to the bigger one. But I just wanted to introduce this mixer so that you're able to see the meringue whipping process happening. So as a result, I'm just going to put that in. And I also find that this mixer is much easier to talk over when I'm using it, which is why I love it. I bought this with my own money, and if you've been on this channel, you will probably know how much I have raved about the efficiency of this mixer. It's sort of entry level, beginner friendly, but on a budget of a little over £200. But you can catch one on a sale or Black Friday or some of these special sales, and that will be good value for money. So in this mixer, we have pasteurized eggs mixed into caster sugar that has completely dissolved with no gritty after feel on that. And then we're going to go ahead and whisk it quickly. We'll start with maybe a few minutes. Into the egg whites, I am adding half a teaspoonful. Oh, Lina G, thank you. I know you can't stay long, but you can catch up on replay. So thanks for being here, Lynn. And for Paula, Nengi, and It's Me. It's Me was right. Lynn, Paula, It's Me, all of you in the chats there. Thank you for being here. Let's whip this up rather quickly so that I can talk to you, because trying to talk over this just sounds like I'm shouting in a dark room, and that's not even fun. So I appreciate you. If you can stay, great. If you can't, check back in on replay and you'll be able to see the entire video on here. But otherwise, have a good day, Lynn, and I'm sure I'll catch you. Nengi. Right. So I think I had a question in the chat about how the eggs were not cooked even when I used to set hot water. Well, I guess hot water has a boiling point before something begins to cook. But also the bowl that I use is heat proof. So it serves as a barrier. And even though I used hot boiling water, once the bowl touches the hot water, the bowl doesn't like get as hot as the water would be enough to cook the egg whites. And also remember, I was stirring the egg whites or trying to kind of move the egg whites. So kind of settling the egg whites by stirring also means that the heat is distributed around. So it doesn't settle in one place enough to cook the eggs. Plus, we were barely there for 2 minutes. So to answer the question, the hot water doesn't get a chance to cook the egg whites at all, and you saw me do it. The other thing is, even if I transition to we were talking about raw eggs and I was cooking that with bain marie, and we're talking red heat sauce over which a bowl of water is simmering underneath, it still has never cooked the egg whites because of the stirring process that also ensures that the heat is kind of distributed evenly. So no, you cook the egg whites if that is what you're concerned about. But if you're that worried, try it in your own time and see. But you did see me do it, so that is one way to kind of be reassured that no, using boiling water and a heat-proof bowl now will ensure that you don't cook your egg whites, and just ensure that you stir into your bowl as well as that is happening. Now that our egg white has been whipping, I think it's been whipping for about 3 minutes or something. The egg whites have to obviously go through different phases. You go from your different stages of peaks to soft peaks to eventually stiff peaks. At this point, we are nowhere near stiff peaks because the peak of the meringue has fallen. You want to get to a point where when I pull this out, it is stiff and doesn't fall over. So I'm going to give it another, I did say it was 6 minutes in total. So I'm going to give it another, say 3 minutes, and we'll see that again. One thing I've noticed though, using the pasteurized egg, is the whipping process. The meringue doesn't whip up with much volume, and I wonder why. I don't know yet, but that is something of interest that I'll be looking into. But then again, the quantity that has always yielded me a larger volume is about I'm using about half the quantity here. So I don't know if that affects volume itself, but anyway, let's whip this up, and then when it gets to stiff peaks, which is what we are aiming for, we'll come back and see when to add the butter. Of course, I should add that in the original Swiss meringue buttercream process, where steam is used to boil or cook the egg white slowly, the whipping in itself does not just create the meringue, but it also creates a medium to cool the egg whites even before the butter is introduced. For the Faux Swiss meringue, that is completely eliminated, because by the time I came to adding the pasteurized eggs, even though they were sitting in warm water to dissolve the sugar, it was barely at room temperature or even body temperature. So we don't need to cool it down at all, and the warmth of the pasteurized eggs shouldn't be a problem. I hope, Nengi and Ismi, your question about the hot water is answered. Now let's go with this till stiff peaks, and I'll be back. Now, to manage the head of my mixer, which I have spoken about, that I'm concerned for, I just have to turn this down a little bit. So let's just have a look again and see where the what the meringue is doing in here. Yep, we are getting there, but it has fallen slightly. So no, we need to go a few more minutes. And as soon as we hit stiff peaks, we'll come back and then we'll add the butter. My mixer head is kind of making noise a little bit. That's my fault, because it has been like that for a little while now, and I haven't managed to fix it. I think I'm just going to leave the buttercream, the meringue as this, if you like, but give or take between 6 to 8 minutes. And as you can see, I did add a bit more cream of tartar. I think we're looking at about 3/4 of a teaspoonful. I'll leave the exact quantities in the description box there for you, so that you will know. Now, Nana Usua in the chat is asking if you can make this Swiss meringue buttercream in advance. I think the answer is very straightforward. It's yes. You can make most buttercreams in advance and save them. But what is key to saving your Swiss meringue buttercream or any other buttercream in advance is the environment within which the buttercream is saved. Butter tends to absorb the smells of the environment within which it's kept, and this will include any goods that contain butter. You're talking any baked good, including your cakes. So if you have any intention to save your cakes or buttercream for that matter in advance, you want to make sure you put a bit of intention within the environment within which you save them. Because if you have, say, strong smelling food elements or substances in your fridge, like say if you put your buttercream with, say, cheese, and for my Ghanaian sister who asked the question, you have palm nut soup there that has precursor in it, then yes, you'll end up with sometimes it's a chance you have to consider. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't save your buttercream or cakes in your home fridge, because there are precautions and guidelines to follow in the way you store your baked elements or food substances with each other in the home fridge. I think in the UK, even when you have the EHO come to do your inspection, they want to see if you have some knowledge of how to save food in the fridge. So bearing that in mind will be a thing to consider and will give you your best results. But this saves very well if you chill it in the fridge. I tend to have the convenience of two dedicated fridges that are exclusively for baking. So I guess I don't speak for everybody, but if you're using your home fridge and you already have food substances, just make sure that your buttercream, first of all, is wrapped up well and it is saved far away from other strong smelling food substances that may from which it may absorb the smells. But otherwise, the answer is yes, you can make it in advance. The problem with Swiss meringue buttercream or some other buttercreams after they have been chilled is that the emulsion tends to fall apart, which is that the fat tends to come apart from the liquid, and then you have either a curdly or soupy looking kind of buttercream. Now, I'll be talking to you more about that in a moment. In the meantime, if you have further questions, leave them in the chat and I'll be answering them. So, Nana Gusua, I hope I have answered your question. And if you have further questions, just leave them there and I'll answer that for you too. Having said that, in every buttercream, in all my videos that I've done buttercream, I have dedicated some time to talking about the butter. And there's good reason for that. Because essentially, as the name says, buttercream, butter is the main ingredient that actually lifts the buttercream and brings it all back together. A good quality buttercream will guarantee great tasting mouthfeel and yield you some great results. So with that said, you want to give some thought to your butter. But besides the quality of the butter is also consistency and the kind of butter at the temperature within which it is introduced into the meringue. Over here, we have the lack of not having to cool the meringue before introducing the butter. So the risk of butter collapsing in the meringue and causing a soupy looking buttercream is highly unlikely. However, we have something we have to consider here. In the making of Swiss meringue, I'll try and break this down slightly in a very understandable, simple form for you. But I think I have a whole dedicated video explaining the making of the Swiss meringue buttercream. There are two key problems with Swiss meringue buttercream. Besides the process that one has to follow to get the best out of it, it inherently has some problems in that at the time you introduce the butter into your meringue, you may end up having the meringue collapse completely, causing your meringue buttercream to look soupy. There's also the problem where it turns curdly. Most of them have visual cues that if you have any knowledge of these problems, you'll understand what may or may not have happened. When your buttercream turns soupy, generally, many a time it is that the structure of your batter has collapsed into the warmth of your meringue. And that is if you are making original Swiss meringue where your meringue has to be hot, as in your egg whites are warm. So when you don't let the egg whites cool completely in the meringue making process, if you do introduce the butter, the warmth of the meringue collapses your butter. That is one way that you will end up with soupy looking melted buttercream. The other thing is also overheating or not presenting your butter in its best form. The best form of butter, or the most recommended, will be using butter at room temperature, which is that at room temperature, your butter should be firm enough, but not solid. So it's firm enough that when you press into it, you can leave a dent or a mark in it, and it's okay to use. I go a little bit further than that. I'll explain. I almost always, for better understanding, say the butter you need to use is almost on a spectrum, right? And unless we get really scientific and measure the temperature of the butter to use, which can then add to the task, Let's try and eliminate that and observe visual cues or simple practices that will help us derive the kind of batter we need. And in the past, a simple test I have undertaken here on this channel is to spread your butter easily on a slice of bread. We're not talking frozen bread, we're talking a very fresh, soft looking slice of bread. If your butter can spread easily, first of all, by observing your butter, you shouldn't have an oily film coating it. That is where you know your butter has melted. But if you press down it and you have to press too hard to derive the dent, then it's too hard butter. So between melted butter and hard butter, you should be able to spread it easily without any much pressure. And a good way to determine that pressure is if you have a fresh slice of bread. If you apply too much pressure, it will tear the bread, the inside of the bread, and that is when you know that the butter is still too hard for you. But if it spreads without any pressure at all, then it's melted, it looks soft and goes everywhere. But if you're just spreading it so easily, I think I have undertaken that test here in some of my buttercream recipes. So I'll link that in the description box if I find it. If I don't find it, I'll probably come back and we'll nerd out on butter and the consistency you need. And I know that the subject of the consistency of butter is very peculiar depending on location too, because I get the advantage of living in cool England where most of the year it's cool, so I don't worry about the butter consistency. But in the winter, it is problematic because you can leave a butter on your countertop for 48 hours and it's still solid butter. So that is something to consider. Having said that, though, you just want to make sure that when you're spreading this butter on your piece of slice of bread, it is easy and it spreads smoothly. That is the kind of butter I would use for my Swiss meringue buttercream. And it is that simple technique of knowing the consistency of butter that has helped me to avoid the inherent problem of the buttercream, the butter melting, or the butter not whipping properly in the meringue and causing it to be curdled. So back to the problems of the Swiss meringue buttercream. I was talking about the initial problem where you either melt the butter too much that the structure of the butter collapses in the meringue, causing the meringue to be soupy. And the other problem is when the butter is too hard, a key ingredient that is contained in the butter is not released. So in simple terms, looks like we're going off on a tangent, but this will help you understand the consistency of butter to use and the role it plays in deriving best results with your buttercream. So stick with me on this one. So butter contains a particular ingredient, which is, I believe, is casein. I tend to confuse emulsifiers here, what is in eggs and what is in butter. So butter contains casein. Casein is found in most dairy products, I believe. Saying that, casein in this case tends to be what you call the emulsifier. What is an emulsifier? The process of deriving this buttercream, as in Swiss meringue buttercream, goes through a process called emulsification. The simple terms is two things that do not combine together in their natural form. We're talking oil and water. If you had a melted butter right now and you poured oil in it and you try to mix it, they will never mix. Pour it. You can try that experiment at home and just to understand the process of Swiss meringue buttercream. They will never mix. Why is that? Because water and oil do not mix. So the process of emulsification essentially changes the forms of the water and the fat in a way where an introduction of an emulsifier, which is a binding ingredient to hold these together, right? So if you did the water and oil experiment, drop an egg yolk or mustard in your mixture and shake it and see. It will come together and it will look milky with a cloudy appearance to it. And the key ingredient is mustard contains the emulsifier, or the egg yolk contains is it lecithin, something. I keep confusing it, but bear with me on that. So that will hold the water and the fat together. Now, in the making of Swiss meringue buttercream, what holds the water and fat together here, the liquid and fat, is casein, which is contained in the butter. So if you get the consistency of butter completely right, or in the range where casein can be released, then it will just hold into the meringue, causing your buttercream to whip up easily without causing the curdly look to it. Sometimes the buttercream curdles and then it picks up and it's whipped up together in the whipping process. But a good understanding of why your your buttercream is looking curdly is because if your butter is too hard at the point of introducing it into your meringue, the casein is not released, so there is a break between your fluids and your fat, which makes your buttercream looks like a cottage cheese looking. And that is why, because the binding ingredients to hold these elements together has not been activated, which is why you are advised at that process to try and warm the bowl up a little bit by introducing some warmth using a hair dryer, or sitting the bowl over a double boiler, or probably like warming a portion of the buttercream up to reconstituent the buttercream process. So that carries on also to when the buttercream is frozen or chilled, because when it is chilled and you bring it back to room temperature, it is a medium that can also lead to the separation of the core ingredients, because the casein goes to sleep in the butter because the structure is kind of hard, which then means you have to whip it back together. I hope that is some sort of understanding on Faux Swiss meringue buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream. So to end this part of the tangent, remember this: if you're making your buttercream and it collapses, it hasn't gone wrong. It's just that the ingredients are not coming together, and there are ways to bring it together, which is in one way you have to warm it up. So you almost have to observe the visual cues here and identify the cause or the problem so you can solve it. In the case where the butter is looking completely soupy, the buttercream is looking completely soupy and it can't whip, and you think you have like melted mess on your hands, you almost have to refreeze or chill the whole thing so that you can get some body to your fat, if you like. And where it's looking like cottage cheese, you want to warm it up to change the consistency a little bit so it gives the batter room to whip up. If it looks soupy and you don't understand what the soupy is and you go and warm it up, you are making it more soupy, and the structure of the fat will break completely and you will end up without any buttercream, and at that point your buttercream is ruined, right? But look out for the soupy appearance where it's looking broken. It looks like it is raw, like soupy looking, like it's liquidy, more liquidy than it has any solid elements to it. At that point, please stop and put your buttercream in the fridge to chill. I try very much to do this and encourage you to follow the process and techniques with the visual cues so you can avoid the part where your buttercream is either broken or curdled. The reason being, if you're inexperienced about the subject of buttercreams, where it is broken, as in melted, and it looks soupy, if you don't know and you chill it, you have to chill it to a certain point before you can whip it. If you over chill it, you end up with hard looking butter that will end up curdling. So it becomes like a moving wheel where you can go from one problem to another and from the other back to the original problem, and it can be a little bit frustrating for you. So I hope that is a bit of information to help you have some understanding of the role butter plays in the making of buttercream, specifically Swiss meringue buttercream. And with all that said, let's see what questions we have over here before we introduce the butter. Vivian, welcome to the stream. It's great to have you back. Yes, Viv, I'm making Faux Swiss meringue buttercream, except I'm making a different, I'm using the same one. I don't know if you were here in our other stream. I made the same buttercream, but I used icing sugar. This time I swapped the icing sugar for caster sugar, and more importantly, I melted, because once you introduce caster sugar, You want to make sure that your sugar doesn't have granules in it. So I essentially tried a different technique. That's all. So it's still Faux Swiss meringue buttercream, but with a slight different techniques, both of which I will link in the description box when we're done with the stream. So I hope the question is answered. And Nengi, I hope your question over there is answered as well as the information about the butter. So enough of butter, and we're going to be adding the butter into the Swiss meringue buttercream. At this point, if you have any problems with the at this point, if we have the same problems I just explained to you about, we'll try and solve it and you will see. So I'm just going to add the butter a little bit at a time. I must say, I have in the past dumped the entire butter and it hasn't greatly affected results, but the recommendation is to add the butter a little bit at a time, which is what I am doing right here. Okay, just to give you some visual cues to what's happening here. After introducing my butter, this is what we have. It looks a bit broken. It is messy. Now, the cue about when your butter is completely melted is it doesn't look like this. It looks completely melted and you have like oily coating over it. That is where it's melted. But we don't have the subject of warmth here melting the butter here, and we had a spreadable consistency. So at this point, the butter, because it's introduced into the meringue, it has completely deflated the meringue, and now it has to whip to come all the way back together. And this is the point where, depending on the consistency and temperature of the butter, we are going to end up with curdled buttercream, or we are going to see it come together. So let's keep going and see. At this point, I'll probably add a pinch of salt to for taste. So it is no wonder that it is coming together and I haven't had that curdled issue. Okay, but I think it's coming together. So let it go a little bit and then we'll add the vanilla, and I'll come back and tell you one observation with this pasteurized egg. I'm probably going to add vanilla just for particularness. I'm going to measure the vanilla, but over here we don't measure our vanilla. Okay, that is a whole tablespoonful. Too much vanilla never killed anybody. Right. I think I really need to go and have my mixer checked out. But with that said, the buttercream has come together. No issues at all. We are great. Now let's try and taste it and see what the mouthfeel is like. Quite frankly, a little bit too much salt only because I was a bit heavy-handed with the salt. So you want to check that. But otherwise, no problem at all whatsoever. I will tell you that what I was saying about the observation, I have found that I don't know if it's the thing that contributes to how it appears. I have found the original Swiss meringue buttercream where the raw egg white, it whips better, it holds better, the volume is better, you know. But otherwise, in terms of taste and mouth feel, there is almost like this may just be a thing of my own bias. Okay, so don't take my word for it. And this is not steeped in research at all. It is just my first hand observation of deriving this buttercream. I find that raw egg white has like a fresher mouth feel, if you like. I can't seem to put my thumb on this, but if I had to choose, I would go for the raw eggs, as in the cooked eggs, over a double boiler. But that is set in my own bias and prejudice because I feel a ways about um, pasteurized eggs. But one actual key thing, I don't find that the volume in terms of the amount and yield is the same compared to raw egg whites if they were used in the original way of making Swiss meringue buttercream. So I might have to look closely at that and find out. Maybe perhaps the use of pasteurized eggs affects the volume of the meringue in a certain way that differs from the use of raw egg whites. I don't know, but I just find that the yield is just too little for me. But with that said, because we were able to derive the consistency of the batter for the right temperature, over here we have the buttercream turn out great. So if you're a complete beginner, and you want a buttercream that has good mouthfeel, easy to make, and ticks the boxes for some of the results that are more pleasant compared to American buttercream, definitely try Faux Swiss meringue buttercream. Look, I'm won over. If I do stick to the original method, that is simply because I am just particular and my own bias will not allow me to try this. But I wanted to undertake this process for you so that as a beginner, if you're looking for an alternative buttercream without having to worry about all the processes, that is likely to make the buttercream process a little difficult and tricky for you, go for this and you will be completely fine with that. I'll leave the details in the description box. But then again, when I was talking about what would cause your buttercream to collapse, as in when it's melted, another thing sometimes I notice is the ratio of butter to meringue. I have found in my research that I don't know what it is, but there are some buttercream that seems to have an excessive amount of butter because the combination of the ingredient compositions remains the same. You are either finding granulated sugar, icing sugar, or caster sugar. And then there is butter and you create them around. Nothing changes in terms of the type of ingredients. What I have noticed is how the ingredient ratios are mixed. Sometimes I have found nearly twice as much or thrice as much butter to the amount of eggs and sugar. And some recipes actually say 1 part of sugar and 2 parts of this. And for that might lead to some of the other complaints that whilst Swiss meringue buttercream is great, in some recipes, customers will complain about like a too buttery mouthfeel. And I can answer that for you. If your ratio of butter is too far out from the amount of sugar and eggs you're using, you are definitely going to yield a very buttery mouthfeel. This kind of buttercream inherently come a little bit more battery. That is if you're comparing it to American buttercream. It's like comparing what apples and oranges. They are not the same and they don't range on the same markers. However, people are who are normally used to American buttercream will find like a slight shock in their system when they try Swiss meringue buttercream. And you are either won over completely or you're like, no, this is too battery for me. The ingredient composition here is balanced because when I started deriving this from an original recipe 8 years ago, the goal was to try and tweak it so that it ticks the boxes for a great mouthfeel and better tasting experience, which is something that we talk about on this channel a lot. If you've been here, you will know that one of my goals for the experience of eating cake itself is not just eat the cake. We're looking at flavors when we come to actually the cake and the recipe itself. But when we're talking about recipe, we're talking about adaptable recipe that guarantees a great taste, gives you a great experience in the making process. You can adapt things and change things. And when it comes to buttercream, my keyword is great mouthfeel and good tasting buttercream. So with all of those markers to consider, this buttercream almost sits there for me. Now let's talk stability of this buttercream. Like I said, when I derived the first batch using the icing sugar, I left it on the side for 48 hours and I was quite surprised. If you go back to the original video that I made using the icing sugar, you'll find that we piped a few details and it had form, it held right. And I was like, whoa, this is quite different. And on the day I was doing that, it was slightly warm in the kitchen and yet the buttercream held its form. It almost gave me the same outcome and presentation as it would for Italian buttercream. And I don't know if it had something to do with using the pasteurized eggs and because the eggs are not cooked in the traditional way of steaming the eggs, which is what lends to the form and stability of the piping element. Now, if we talk about stability in terms of how it can withstand the weather, I haven't gone as far as try that because the only way you will know that a buttercream can withstand heat is try it on a hot weather day. We have had temperatures go up to 28, 29, 30 degrees. So I might have to try that and come back and tell you. But unfortunately, the summer here is quite short in terms of how much sun we can have on a hot weather day. So that might pass quickly. But I can say no buttercream is made to completely withstand warm weather temperatures. At some point, because of the melting point of the butter required in buttercream, your buttercream will always be susceptible to extreme weather conditions where the sun is working against you. But the goal is always to have a sort of buttercream that will withstand the heat to a certain reasonable point to sustain the heat. All right. So having left the other buttercream at room temperature for 48 hours, it was fairly solid. I will say though, it wasn't used for covering a cake. So I am not speaking for the experience of covering a cake with this buttercream where it hasn't fallen apart. We might as well try it sometime in a future video. But if you've had experience of using full buttercream, where Swiss buttercream for your cake and whether it's held or falling apart, do let us know because that will be an interesting experiment to undertake. Kay is back here. Hi, Kay. Welcome to the stream today. I wonder, Kay, because you're in South Africa and the weather there is likely to be hot, what buttercream option do you go for? What are your buttercreams? So, Nana Wutua is asking in the chat. I'll just put the question out here so that you have some context if I'm answering. She says, in terms of decorating with this, can fondant, acrylic, or car toppers be stacked onto this easily, please? Okay, right. I will answer that in a moment, but let me just slow this mixer down to rid of the air bubbles, and then we can talk about that. In the meantime, let me just wash my hands too. Right. Nana Usua is asking if using this buttercream to cover a cake with fondant and adding additional decorative elements will be any good. Well, here's the answer for you. Because I haven't covered a cake in this before, I couldn't tell you as a matter of fact based on what undertaking it and observing and giving you factual information based on that. So bear that in mind, because all I've ever done is pipe with it and leave the buttercream sitting at room temperature. But with my knowledge of buttercreams over the years that I've tried time and again, there's a good reason why I don't use buttercream. I prefer ganache for covering my cakes, even if it's going to be a base coat before I apply fondant. Because I find ganache to be a little more solid. Actually, it's super superior compared to buttercream. But I'll have to test it against Italian buttercream to see where we are at. Because in terms of stability of buttercreams, nothing comes close to Italian buttercream, unless perhaps there's a specialized recipe that is optimized for solving stability problems in the sun. With that said, buttercream under fondant is always going to be problematic at some point to a very good extent. And it is the same for this buttercream. In fact, I covered the first batch I made using the icing sugar. I turned it into a chocolate buttercream, and I covered a cake with it. Buttercream, at some point, even in the fridge, when you touch it with warm hands or even your hands at room, it will leave a dent. So I think it is still like sensitive, if you like. The use of buttercream on a cake is always going to leave room for a sort of soft appearance or a slightly not so settled surface for you. But to answer your question, I believe yes, you can use you can apply toppers to it and decorate your cake, no problem. I will be rather concerned about the use of fondant, because by the time you apply fondant to your cake and then polish the fondant, you are upsetting the cake. So if you use buttercream, you want to be very careful. I personally don't like buttercream for my cakes. So perhaps if I'm advising you on this one, my bias is coming through, because I don't want to be bothered with the trouble of buttercream. Because if you've watched I used American buttercream to pipe some details and I struggled. If that video is right on the channel for you to watch and see how much trouble I went into. It was so hard for me to do. So my point is, if you're using it for simple decorations, including adding fondant, it is possible. I couldn't tell you from my own experience what the good and the bad. And if obviously you've been on this channel, you will know that my intentions and advice and guidelines are always set on actually undertaking the process and giving you the answer from experience doing the thing. So I might have to try that and come back and tell you. I don't know, because at the moment there is a ton of things on my table to do, between ingredient recipes, filming, editing, and all the moving parts of the other aspects of cake related activities. My dear, there is so much I can do. But if you do enjoy the live videos, one way you can support the channel is just like the video. And if you do get notification about a video that is up, make an effort to watch it. Because if you just click out, you are hurting the channel. And at the moment, we are such a small channel. We don't derive an income to do any of this at all, as a matter of fact. So your only support at this point is to try and like the videos, share them, binge on them if you find something useful about them, interact with the videos, so that I can keep answering your questions and teaching you. Because the goal here's my value proposition. We all start from somewhere. We do. If you start baking and decorating, at some point, to build your skill, I will encourage you to take a class, book some mentorship sessions, learn from somebody who is actually doing the thing you want to do. And sometimes that will come at a cost. But when you're starting, that cost can be hard for you to achieve. So the goal is to leave some useful, practical resources that are reliable, dependable, with actual fact-based processes, so you can undertake, you can come, if you land on this channel and you're a beginner, you can feel confident that I can do this, and then you can take it and move on. So whilst we're at it, do consider subscribing, hit the notification bell to join the family here, like and share this video. And if you're watching this on replay, hello there, do join the chat here. We are a supportive bunch out here. We have great company and we do have a lot of fun. I was actually thinking there was a live we did a little while ago where we veered into social issues and we were talking about different, a couple who are slightly controversial. You know, we are a very serious based channel out here, but we're also humans who love different things. It would be great to bring a fun aspect to the channel. What do you think? Can we hear your opinion? If you're in the chat, if we had a day in a week where we do, I think Chantilly P, we called it cake and giggles because we literally had such a good laugh on the day. So should we have a segment one day a week where we are not baking, we are not doing decorations, we'll be talking things about cake, but we'll also be discussing social matters, our own values, things that we do about our own businesses, decisions we make, just so we can learn from each other. What do you think? Let me know what your views are in the chat. With that said, I swapped to the paddle attachment just so that we have we pop up some of the air bubbles and have a smoother buttercream. You can let this run for a little while, but because we're on the live, I've just decided to let it go. You know, so okay, podcast. Right. So you would like the cake and giggles, right? Okay, that would be fun. So the cake and giggles will cover most things. There won't be a set plan for it. For instance, if there is I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't even have a Netflix subscription. Who is with me here? Who watches Netflix? I don't know. But I don't have it. I personally don't, but I have managed to watch I have managed to watch, what do you call it? I did watch the Beckhams. I found that interesting. I also watched the docuseries. Now this is going a while back. I did watch the Harry and Meghan series. That was different. Okay, can you tell where that was slightly different? But I also enjoyed the Beckham. I think that is it Beckham or the Beckhams, whatever that was. It was really like entertaining. And then I know there is Bridgerton. Am I the only person who knows nothing about Bridgerton and the Crown? Okay. Who watches those stuff? Who watches that? Who in the chat watches Bridgerton? Okay. Vivian, you and I will be sisters. Okay. We don't subscribe to that. Okay. Because how much is it now? Is it $8.99 or $12.99? Look, it's not even the $12.99 that's a problem for me. Like, let's taste this one more time. We're good, actually. So Vivian, what do you like watching? If you had to watch something on TV, what would that be? Right, let's move this around. I think, to be honest, the aftertaste of the because originally the amount of what do you call it, cream of tartar is half a teaspoonful. I think we should stick with that. because I did go for 3/4 of a spoonful and I can feel the aftertaste. But that is set in my own error. So I will adapt, or I'll put the recommended quantity, the right quantity, down in the description box when I come to the chat, when I come to the end of the session. But saying that, okay, Great Britain. Okay, a Parkat watches Great British Bake Off. Okay, you know what? I used to a long time ago. Actually, when I didn't bake, I used to watch that, and this is going back like 8 years ago. Good. When I didn't bake, I watched that, but after a while, it was like, I don't know what that was all about. A friend used to get me to watch, is it Love Island? And then I was over it. So I used to also love the Housewives a lot, but the hoops I have to jump to be able to watch that is just not worth my time. So no. But it would be nice to have something in common that we can watch or talk about. That would be fun. Now, if you're wondering what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to see how this buttercream holds up in terms of shape. It holds up well. Look, we've derived the one that has fallen is because it's not stuck. Look at the detail in and I'm using the star tip, which is the small closed star tip here. And look at the amount of detail, because if you're missing detail, it's either your buttercream is not holding and it's melted, so it gets a bit floppy and the details are not fine. Look at how defined the lines are on this buttercream here. So yes, it holds well, it pipes well. Look. And it flows easily. If I had whipped it a little longer, we should be able to have very fine buttercream piping. Can you see? Vivian, you love sports. You're not going to have me watching sports, darling. Right? So we have some fine details over here. There you have it. So yes, great buttercream. I think sometimes what I've done is I employ buttercream for different purposes. So whilst I may not necessarily have this buttercream to cover my cakes with, I wouldn't mind using it for piping because it will give me better results. In terms of stability, like I said, I might have to go and use it to cover a cake, and then I will have to come back and tell you about what it looks like. So, or perhaps I have to look at the freezer and see if I have some cake in there that I can cover this in, leave it on the side for a day and see what the results are. Having said that, that's our Faux Swiss meringue buttercream using the warm water and caster sugar. And I think the results, besides my own error in the process, the results are actually great to recommend. So have we have we found a buttercream recipe that is beginner friendly, that can yield at a good mouthfeel, is very stable in terms of piping detail, holds well, and gives you great results? The answer is yes.